They mocked my legacy skills. My revenge exposed Vector. 3 days later, the CEO restored me. My name is Tamsin Cole. I am the head of contract at Blue Fern Equity Group, which is a sterile glass and steel way of saying I am the nervous system of a company that trades in billions. I am 33 years old in the world of private equity. This means I am either a prodigy or, as of recently, a problem. I am not a people person. I am a process person. People are volatile, emotional, and prone to forgetting critical compliance steps in favor of a closing bonus. Processes are clean, they are binary, they work or they fail. And if they fail, they leave a log. I am Blue Fern's long-term memory. When our founders first scaled from a boutique fund to a predator, they realized their handshake deals and Excel-based tracking were bleeding millions. They hired me. I built the machine. They now live inside the vendor onboarding protocol. I wrote it. The automated checklist for contractual leak detection that flags redundant spending. I coded it. The 120-page compliance manual that every new hire signs but never reads. I am its author, apparently, its only student. Abrofer, I am the firewall. I am the audit trail. I am the reason we've passed every SEC review for 6 straight years without a finding, and that is why I had to be removed. The new variable was named Colton Reeves. He arrived on a Tuesday, smelling of expensive cologne and entitlement. He was all square jaw, aggressively white teeth, and a watch on his wrist that cost more than my first car. He was introduced as the new head of strategic momentum, a title so meaningless it could only have been invented by consultants. His vocabulary was a slurry of buzzwords copied from airport business book summaries. He spoke of growth mindsets, synergistic alignment, and disrupting our own verticals. I speak in clauses, addendums, and termination for cause. We were oil and water. But Colton wasn't just an annoyance. He was a political appointment. He had a parachute. His father, a man I'd never seen, was a senior advisor to the board of directors. Worse, our CFO, Derek Vale, reportedly owed Colton's family a significant favor. In this building, loyalty isn't earned, it's bartered. Colton wasn't hired to work, he was hired to ascend, and I was in his way. The erosion began quietly. It started with the email chains. On Monday, I was removed from the vendor review distribution list. I founded that list. On Wednesday, I was cut from the Q4 contract finalization thread. I wrote the templates for those contracts. By Friday, I was no longer included on the Compliance Oversight Weekly Summary, the summary that my system generated. There was no memo, no HR notification, no awkward conversation about a realignment of duties, just a silent digital excision. It was a classic soft squeeze. Isolate the target, cut their information flow, and wait for them to either suffocate or scream. I did neither. My first rule of engagement: observe, do not react. Emotion is a vulnerability. It does not belong in the process. Panic is a tactical error. Anger is a distraction. They were feeding me stimuli, expecting a predictable human response. They wanted me to march into an office and ask why. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to forward the email to HR with a complaint. That is what a victim does. I am not a victim. I am a systems analyst. I was being presented with a new problem. My response was not to feel, it was to document. That night, I activated my black box protocol. It's a routine I built for myself years ago, a personal fail-safe. You don't build a fortress for a multi-billion-dollar company without installing a few hidden cameras for your own protection. From my terminal, I didn't just back up my files. I ran a full export of my system permissions, then cross-referenced them with the admin-level permissions I still held. I saved a CSV of all access right changes made in the last 90 days. I exported the complete edit logs for my vendor manuals. I pulled the approval histories for every major contract signed in the last 6 months. I was creating a timeline, a snapshot of the world as it existed before their hands started moving in the shadows. I encrypted the container file, uploaded it to a private external server, and then triple deleted the local source. By the time I logged off at 2 a.m, I had a perfect time-stamped record of my own digital anatomy. The next move came from his assistant, Piper Mays. She was young, nervous, and lived to please Colton. She was the implement, not the weapon. An email from her landed at 7 p.m. Subject: urgent reschedule vendor finalization. Hi, Tamsin. We need to move the vendor finalization meeting. The only time Colton and Derek are both free is tonight at 10 o'clock. Apologies for the late notice. This is due to critical room capacity issues. Best, Piper. Room capacity at 10 o'clock at night in an office building with 42 conference rooms, most of which were dark. It was a pathetic, transparent lie. This wasn't a meeting. It was a stress test. They were pushing to see if I would break protocol. Would I miss it? Would I complain? Would I show up unprepared and exhausted, giving them the ammunition they needed to paint me as not a team player or failing to keep up? I replied within 60 seconds. Subject, urgent reschedule vendor finalization. Confirmed. See you at 10 o'clock. See, broke. I sent the email and went back to work. If they wanted to play in the dark, I would bring a flashlight. I used the 3 hours to prepare. Not for the meeting they thought we were having, but for the one they were trying to hide. I ran a fresh compliance audit on the 3 vendors up for final approval, and that's when I found it. A name on the list, Vector Solutions. A cold spike of adrenaline hit my chest. Not Vector. It couldn't be. I pulled up my own archives, the black box copy, not the company's live server. I typed in the name. There it was. 18 months prior. Vector Solutions flagged for a catastrophic NDA breach. They had commingled client data on a non-secure server. It was a fireable offense, a multi-million-dollar liability. I had personally overseen the termination. I wrote the notice, I locked their account. They were on the permanent blacklist. I switched back to the live server. Vector was active. My fingers flew. I ran an admin trace. The reactivation request had been processed 3 days ago. The approval signature, Colton Reeves. He had overridden my termination flag. He had bypassed the master compliance checklist. He had single-handedly resurrected a compromised, high-risk entity and was pushing it through for final approval. This was the why. This was the reason I was being cut out. This wasn't just a power grab. This was a cover-up. He wasn't just trying to take my job. He was using his new power to bury a landmine in my system. I documented everything. I took a high-resolution screenshot of the approval screen showing his name and the exact timestamp. I ran a checksum on the system log file to prove it hadn't been altered. I saved them both to my encrypted drive. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the snap. Brewery. I didn't have to wait long. The 10 p.m. meeting was a farce. Colton and Derek, the CFO, lounged in their chairs, scrolling through their phones while I presented the data. They waved away my compliance checks as bottlenecks. Colton called the vendors strategic partners and dismissed my risk analysis as a legacy mindset. I just observed. I just took notes. After they left, I stayed behind in the cavernous, silent conference room to finalize the minutes as my role still required. The large presentation Mac on the credenza was still logged into Colton's profile. He was always careless. A notification slid onto the screen. An iMessage. It wasn't just a text. It was a group chat. The name at the top was Momentum All. I saw my face. It was a candid photo taken from across the office floor earlier that day. I was at my desk concentrating, my expression severe. It was unflattering. It was meant to be. Beneath the photo, a new message from Colton Reeves. The recipient was clearly intended to be Derek Vale, the CFO. Fire fast. Brr. I stared at it. The words hung in the air, blue and digital and absolute. This wasn't an interpretation. It wasn't paranoia. It was a directive. A death sentence in 3 words. My mind didn't go to panic. It went to logistics. How had this happened? I saw the chat participants. It wasn't just Colton and Derek. Piper was there and so was I. I scrolled and scrolled. Oh my God. Piper hadn't created a private chat for their little Momentum clique. In her haste, she had typed Momentum and selected the Momentum All distribution list, the list that included me, the list that, in her incompetence, she must have synced from the company-wide directory without checking the members. A fatal clerical error. The kind of process failure I had spent my career eliminating, and it was about to be their undoing. My hand was steady on the mouse. I didn't tremble. The anger was present, but it was cold. It was a tool. I moved the cursor. I clicked Save Image. The screenshot of the iMessage, my face, Colton's name, his words, the audience saved instantly to the desktop. I dragged the file into my encrypted folder right next to the vector approval and the access logs. I stood up. The mask was perfect. I was no longer just the head of contract control. I was the chief architect of a system, and I was about to demonstrate with surgical precision exactly why you do not let emotion interfere with the process. I was no longer in damage control. I was in charge of a controlled demolition. I saved the image. I logged out of Colton's profile on the conference room Mac, leaving no trace. I gathered my notes. slid my laptop into my bag, and walked out. The overhead lights in the vast office clicked off floor by floor as I passed. The building security system, another process I had helped design, was tracking my exit. My apartment was quiet, sterile, and offered a high-floor view of the city's unblinking lights. I did not sleep, I did not pace, I did not pour a drink. I plugged my encrypted drive into my personal workstation, a machine that does not and will never connect to the Blue Fern network. The fire her fast screenshot was the emotional trigger. It was the insult. But insults don't win cases, data does. Colton had made 2 critical errors. He had been sloppy with his technology, and he had underestimated my function. My function is to find, catalog, and connect. I opened my black box archive. My focus was surgical. First, I extracted the CSV file of my access permissions as they stood 3 months ago. Then, I pulled the CSV of my permissions as of that afternoon. I ran a differential analysis, asking the program to highlight only one thing: what had been removed. The list scrolled. Access level admin changed to access level read only. Vendor oversight portal user group approver changed to user group user. Contract finalization dist list vendor review deleted. Dist list compliance oversight deleted. This was the digital evidence of the restructuring they had never bothered to announce. This was the isolation, but I needed the linchpin. I needed to connect Colton's cover-up to my demotion. I cross-referenced the change logs with a Vector Solutions file, and there it was, the cut break. My admin-level access to the vendor audit logs. The one power I had to see who approved what and when wasn't revoked this week. It was revoked exactly 48 hours before Colton approved the blacklisted Vector. It was a beautiful, clean piece of evidence. He didn't demote me because he wanted my job. He demoted me so he could commit fraud without me seeing it. The fire her fast text wasn't the start of the attack, it was the cleanup. A panicked attempt to get rid of the witness after the crime had already been committed. I began to build the event map. A simple spreadsheet, but it was a work of art. Column B, event. Column C, actor. Column D, evidence file. T-48 hours, 1432 EST. Access change, T-Cole permissions for vendor audit downgraded to read only. Actor, C. Reeves via admin proxy. File, permissions diff. Vendor approval Vector Solution status changed from blacklist to active. Actor, C. Reeves. File, Vector approval PNG. T plus 3 hours, 10:35 EST. Communication, IM message, fire her fast with photo. Actor, C. Reeves to D. Vale and others file, fire her fast PNG. T plus 3 hours, 10:35 EST. Communication error, IM message received by T. Cole. Actor, Piper Mays, improper group creation, file, momentum all list. A. Burshri, I had the corporate case. I had the motive, the action, the cover-up, and the intent, all stamped by an objective system clock. A different person would take this package and go to human resources. They would file a whistleblower complaint. They would tell their story. That is not my way. HR is not a weapon. It is a cleanup crew. It exists to protect the company from liability, not to dispense justice. Going to HR would be tattling. I was not tattling. I was preparing for litigation. I would not tell my story. I would submit a chain of custody. But the Vector fraud was only half of the equation. It was the technical foul. The fire her fast text was the personal one. Colton hadn't just committed a crime against the company. He had declared war on me. And for that, I needed a different venue. I closed the spreadsheet and opened a new file, my personal archive. I scrolled past old apartment leases, insurance documents, and tax returns until I found the folder labeled Westminster Oaks Club. It is one of those absurd old money institutions that corporate titans use as their private playground. Dark wood, dress codes, 5-figure annual dues, and a waiting list a decade long. Blue Fern held a corporate membership, one I rarely used, but 3 years ago, when the club's aging board decided they needed to modernize their bylaws to avoid lawsuits in the 21st century, they formed a subcommittee. As Blue Fern's compliance expert, I was volunteered. I spent 6 months in a dusty boardroom with 3 octogenarian lawyers, rewriting the club's entire ethical charter. They were focused on antitrust and insider trading. I was focused on process. I wrote the sections on member conduct, data privacy, and dispute resolution. They were bored by it, so they let me write whatever I wanted. I knew that charter by heart. I helped build it. I opened the 300-page PDF, and my fingers hit Control plus F. I typed in 7.4b. There it was. My own words ratified by a board of billionaires. Clause 7.4b. Prohibited conduct? No member or guest shall utilize club facilities, branding, or services to enact, facilitate, or host any event that has the express purpose of the public humiliation, professional exclusion, or reputational degradation of an individual who serves in an operational or fiduciary capacity for a member organization. It was a clause I wrote specifically to prevent powerful partners from using the club's neutral ground to ambush and bully their subordinates or rivals during social events. It was an anti-abuse clause hidden in plain sight. Ibra Colton, in his arrogance, would never have read this. He just saw the club as a stage, a place to flaunt his new power. I suspected he was about to make a mistake. I opened Instagram, a public forum. I went to Piper Maze's profile. It was public, of course. She was the type who needed to document every perceived step up the ladder. Her latest story, posted 1 hour ago, a boomerang of clinking champagne glasses. Her latest post 10 minutes ago, a photo. The caption, "Power lunch with the best team taking Blue Fern's momentum to the next level. Westminster Oaks strategic momentum." The photo was of Colton, Derek Vale, and 2 of our largest clients, Graham Ellery and his partner. They were at a large round table in the Westminster Oaks' Sapphire Hall. They were all smiling, but Piper, in her desperate need to be part of the in-crowd, had framed the photo badly. To the left of Colton, there was an empty chair. The place setting was untouched, and just visible, half cut off by the frame, was a pristine white place card. The light was reflecting off the gold-embossed logo. But I could just make out the name. My name. They hadn't just not invited me. They had invited me, set a place for me, and then publicly disinvited me at the last second, leaving the empty chair as a silent, visible statement of my exclusion in front of a major client. This was the public humiliation defined in 7.4b Hebrewware, and they had just posted the evidence themselves. I didn't just screenshot the photo. I right-clicked, view source, and downloaded the high-resolution original image file directly from the server. I ran a full metadata export capturing the geotag Oaks, the timestamp, and the device ID. I went to the Westminster Oaks internal website. I looked up the reservations for the Sapphire Hall. There it was, Blue Fern Equity, Siege Reeves, 6 guests. I cross-referenced the club's public events calendar. There was no club-wide event, meaning the room capacity excuse Piper had used, as I suspected, a lie. I had the photo, I had the guest list, I had the reservation log, I had the bylaws. I opened the Westminster Oaks members-only portal and clicked on the Ethical Governance tab. A simple form appeared. I had designed this form. It was routed not to a customer service rep, but to a specific private inbox. Submitted by Tamsin Cole, member ID 881. Recipient, Miles Archer, General Manager. Complaint type, Level 2. Member conduct violation. Subject, violation of Ethical Charter 704B, Blue Fern event description pursuant to the club charter. I am filing a formal notice of a breach of Clause 704B, a member event hosted by Mr. Colton Reeves, guest of Blue Fern corporate membership in the Sapphire Hall today, constituted the intentional and public exclusion of a key operational head, the undersigned, in front of active clients. This action constitutes the use of club facilities for professional humiliation and reputational degradation. See attached evidence. Exhibit A, digital photograph of event posted by guest P. Maze showing deliberate empty chair exclusion. Exhibit B, reservation log for Sapphire Hall. Exhibit C, official guest list provided for the event. Exhibit D, relevant extract of Clause 7.4b for your convenience. I await confirmation of receipt. A. Burhri, I hit send. The screen refreshed. A small gray automated message appeared. Thank you. Your submission ID G2991 has been received by the General Manager's office. A formal response protocol will be initiated within 72 hours. The gears were turning. Miles Archer was a man who, like me, lived by the rules. He was ex-military and ran the club like a fortress. He would not be pleased. This was not an HR complaint. It was a shot across the bow of a battleship. Now for the final piece, the corporate trap. I returned to my Blue Fern email. I needed Colton to confirm his own actions. I needed him to put his own neck in the noose willingly. I drafted an email. The tone was crucial. It could not be angry. It could not be accusatory. It had to be the email of a defeated, cooperative, slightly confused employee. It had to be pure, neutral, HR-friendly language. To Colton Reeves, CC Derek Vale. Subject, realignment of client-facing duties. Colton, following our recent discussions and the clear new direction for the Momentum Initiative, it appears my role in client-facing interactions is being restructured to ensure a smooth transition and avoid any confusion. I will be formally withdrawing from all client-facing tasks, including the Graham Ellery account, effective immediately. Please let me know who will be taking point on the compliance and contract oversight for these accounts so I can forward my outstanding files and transition notes. Thank you. Tamsin Cole, Head of Contract Control. It was a masterpiece of corporate ambiguity. It was polite, it was professional, and it was bait. I sent it, I sat back, I did not have to wait 5 minutes. My inbox chimed. It was not a reply, it was a forward. Colton, in his infinite arrogance, had forwarded my email, and he hadn't just sent it to one person. From Colton Reeves to Annelle Boyd, CEO, CC Derek Vale, Momentum All Distribution List. Subject, FWD Realignment of Client-Facing Duties. Team, just keeping everyone in the loop on our strategic realignment as we pivot to a more dynamic growth mindset. Tamsin has recognized that her legacy skill set is best utilized in a back-end capacity, and she is proactively stepping away from client-facing work to support our new momentum. This is the kind of team-first thinking we need to win. Great stuff. Ibrahim. See, I stared at the screen. He had done it. He had taken my carefully crafted neutral email and in front of the CEO and the entire Momentum group, the same group that saw the fire her fast text. He had publicly confirmed everything. He confirmed the restructuring was real. He confirmed I was being removed from clients. He confirmed he was the one in charge of this decision, and he had signed his name to it. He thought he was taking a victory lap. He thought he was showing the CEO how he was handling the problem. What he had just done was create Exhibit E. He had just handed me a signed confession. Colton was not content to win just on the internal servers. He needed a stage, and he needed an audience. He needed to be seen defeating me. My email, where I had proactively stepped away from clients, had only fed his arrogance. He saw it as surrender. Now he needed to cement his victory in front of the prize Graham Ellery. The email from Piper was almost cheerful. Subject, rescheduled Blue Fern Ellery Q4 strategy lunch. Tamsin. Colton and Graham are meeting tomorrow to finalize the Q4 strategy. We've secured the Sapphire Hall at the Westminster Oaks again. 12:30 p.m. Colton felt it was important for you to be there to formally hand over the compliance file. See you there. It was a summons, not an invitation, a command performance for my own execution. He wasn't just satisfied with my removal. He wanted me to perform the handover publicly. He wanted Graham Ellery to see me pass the torch to physically demonstrate my new subservient role. The next day, I arrived at the Westminster Oaks at 12:29 p.m. The Sapphire Hall was bathed in the cold blue light of its namesake. The table was set. Colton was already there, holding court, his laughter too loud for the room. Derek Vale sat beside him, nursing a glass of water, his eyes darting. Piper was hovering, a nervous shadow. Graham Ellery was not yet present. Brooke, I walked to the table. The maitre d', a man I did not recognize, intercepted me with a stiff smile. May I help you, madam? Tamsin Cole, I'm with the Blue Fern Party. He consulted his tablet. He frowned. He scrolled. Yes, I'm afraid there seems to have been a miscommunication. We only have the table set for 4. Colton looked over, his face a perfect mask of surprise. Oh, Tamsin, good to see you. Is there a problem? Piper rushed forward, wringing her hands. Tam, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. The club must have. They said we were at capacity. I had to prioritize the primary client team. I thought I sent you an email. It was a lie. Delivered poorly. The Sapphire Hall could seat 50. Capacity limits, she said again, the words hollow and rehearsed. Colton shrugged an expansive, what can you do? Gesture aimed at Derek. Well, since you're here, why don't you just drop off the file? We can take it from there. This was the moment. This was the public humiliation. They expected me to stand there, file in hand like a defeated courier. They expected me to stammer, to blush, to argue, or to tuck my tail and flee in shame. I did none of those things. I looked past Colton, past the empty chairs, to the heavy oak-paneled walls. I smiled, a thin, tight smile that didn't touch my eyes. Of course, I said, my voice perfectly level. A capacity issue, how unfortunate. I did not hand him the file. I kept it tucked under my arm. I wouldn't want to crowd you. Please enjoy your lunch. I turned and walked out. I did not hurry. My footsteps were silent on the thick monogrammed carpet. The moment the heavy door clicked shut behind me, I had my phone in my hand. I was in the grand marble atrium. I opened my texts to Miles Archer, GM, Westminster Oaks. Time, 12:31 p.m. Message Miles, Tamsin Cole suspected 7.4B incident currently in progress. Sapphire Hall Blue Fern Party second instance. Standing by. I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. I walked out of the club's massive front doors and into the bright sunlight, the compliance file still securely in my possession. I took a cab back to my apartment, not the office. In my lobby, there is a large framed photograph. It's a boring corporate artifact, a picture of the Westminster Oaks Ethics Subcommittee from 3 years ago. There I am, younger, sitting at a long table with the 3 old lawyers. We are all holding up signed copies of the new charter. My copy. I looked at the photo as I waited for the elevator. It was a reminder. The ink is the shield, the process is the weapon. The invisible strike had been launched. Now I simply had to wait for the acoustics of the club to carry the impact. The retaliation was not loud. It was silent and administrative, which is the most terrifying kind. The next morning, an email went out. It was not from Piper. It was not from Colton. It was from the office of Miles Archer, general manager of the Westminster Oaks Club. Subject, urgent venue change, Blue Fern Ellery meeting. To C. Reeves, G. Ellery, D. Vale, T. Cole. Due to an unexpected scheduling conflict and a review of club protocols, your lunch today has been relocated from the Sapphire Hall to the Veranda North. The menu and arrangements have been adjusted accordingly by my office to ensure a seamless experience. We apologize for any inconvenience. Miles Archer, General Manager. A. Brof. I read the email 3 times. The Veranda North, it wasn't a dining room, it was a formal hearing room. It was the room we had used for the Ethics Committee meetings. It was soundproofed, had no view, and was deliberately furnished to feel austere and serious. He had not just changed the room, he had changed the entire context of the meeting. He had moved them from a stage to a courtroom. A second email, this one from Miles's personal account, hit my inbox 1 minute later. To Tamsin Cole. From Miles Archer. Subject, Rear File G2991. Ms. Cole, as a key stakeholder in the club's ethical charter, your presence is requested at the Veranda North today at 12:30 p.m. to ensure all charter protocols are properly observed during this member-client interaction. My staff will have you seated appropriately. P. Brewer. It was brilliant. I was no longer an attendee. I was no longer the handover girl. I was being invited back as an auditor, as a shareholder in the club's ethics. He had given me a new title, one that superseded any title Blue Fern could bestow or revoke. I arrived at 12:25 p.m. The Veranda North was exactly as I remembered. The air was still and heavy. There was no music. Instead of a large round table of forced bonhomie, Miles had arranged 4 heavy leather armchairs around a small square table. It was intimate, unavoidable, and deeply uncomfortable. A single place card was at one of the chairs. It did not say Head of Contract Control. It did not say Blue Fern Equity. It said simply Tamsin Cole. My chair. It was positioned to have a clear view of the door and of everyone else. It was a position of observation, a position of power. I sat. Colton and Derek arrived at 12:30 p.m. Piper was not with them. Colton was mid-laugh telling some loud story to Derek. He pushed open the door to the Veranda North and his voice died in the thick, silent air. His smile didn't just falter. It froze, cracked, and fell. He saw the room. He saw the 4-chair arrangement, and then he saw me already seated watching him. Tamsin, he said. The swagger was gone. His voice was a flat, confused monotone. What? I thought Miles said the room was moved. He did, I said. Please sit. Febrov. Before he could process this, Graham Ellery entered. Graham was old school. He was a man who, like me, read the fine print. He had built an empire on logistics, and he did not suffer fools. He took in the scene in half a second. The strange room. Colton's panicked expression and me sitting calmly. He didn't look at Colton. He looked directly at me. He gave a single short nod. It was not a greeting. It was an acknowledgement, an alignment. Colton scrambled to recover, pulling out a chair for Graham, his movement suddenly jerky and unnatural. "Graham, good to see you. Bizarre room, eh? Guess the club is overbooked." Anyway, as I was saying, a waiter, one of Miles's most senior staff, entered. He was rigid, his face impassive. "Mr. Ellery, the chef has prepared a special shrimp amuse-bouche to begin." He placed a delicate single shrimp on a porcelain spoon in front of Graham. Graham Ellery looked at the shrimp. He looked at Colton. "I'm allergic to shellfish," Graham said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "It's been in my client file for 20 years. My assistant confirms it with every booking." Colton's face went white. "Piper," he whispered, looking at the door as if she might materialize and take the blame. Waiter, take this away." "Of course, sir," the waiter said, removing the dish. It was a fatal error, a process failure in the Sapphire Hall. It would have been an embarrassing gaffe smoothed over by apologies and free champagne. Here, in this sterile, silent room, it was an indictment. It was proof of incompetence. It showed that Colton's new momentum team, the team that was supposed to be so dynamic, couldn't even handle a basic dietary restriction. The very system I had built to prevent this, the client file to kitchen sink, had been bypassed or broken by his restructuring. Colton was stammering an apology when Miles Archer entered. Miles was a tall man, impeccably dressed. He moved with a silent, absolute authority. He did not speak. He walked directly to Colton's side. He placed a single, folded piece of heavy cardstock on the table, just to the left of Colton's water glass. Colton stopped talking. He stared at the paper as if it were a scorpion. Slowly, he unfolded it. I was too far away to read it, but I didn't need to. I saw Colton's hand, the one with the flashy watch, begin to tremble. Miles hadn't written a paragraph. He had written just 3 words. 3 words handwritten in black ink that I knew had just ended Colton's career at the Westminster Oaks and probably at Blue Fern. 3 words that made the fire her fast text look like child's play. "Abrer." The air in the veranda north was so cold, so still, it seemed to absorb all sound. Colton stared at the folded card Miles had placed before him. He had not unfolded it. He was treating it as a live explosive, his hand hovering over it, his bravado utterly shattered. The shrimp amuse-bouche, a monument to his team's incompetence, sat untouched. "As I was saying," Colton tried again, his voice cracking, "our Q4 projections are based on a new synergistic model he was pitching. He was still pitching. He was a machine set to sell. Unaware the power had been cut." He looked at Graham Ellery, desperate for a lifeline. Graham was not looking at him. He was looking at me. His gaze was analytical, devoid of pity. He had processed the room, the failed shrimp, the presence of the general manager, and my new, unexplained role as ethical stakeholder. He was a man who built an empire on supply chains, and he knew a broken link when he saw one. He held up a hand, a quiet, dismissive gesture that silenced Colton instantly. "Tamsin," Graham said. His voice was not loud, but it commanded the room. "A simple question. Are you still handling the compliance protocols for my account?" This was the pivot, the entire elaborate stage play, the room, the note. The shrimp had been the prelude. This was the hearing. I kept my hands folded on my lap. I did not lean forward. I let the silence stretch, forcing Colton and Derek to swim in it. "I was asked to step away from all client-facing work," I replied, my tone as neutral as a system report, "per an internal restructure." I used the exact words, the HR-approved, sterile passive language. Asked to step away, a directive, not a choice. Client-facing, defining the specific nature of the exclusion. Internal restructure. The official corporate lie he had pinned his strategy on. Graham Ellery processed this. He nodded slowly. He looked down at the table, then back at me. "Odd choice," he said. "It was a simple assessment, but in this room it was a verdict." He then looked at his own notes open on the table. "An odd choice," he repeated, this time to himself. "You're the architect of the data integrity protocols we spent 6 months integrating, removing the architect in the middle of a strategic expansion. That's not momentum, Colton. That's a structural risk." Colton saw the opening and leaped, but he was clumsy. "No, Graham, that's just it. We're diversifying our interaction streams. Tamsin built a fantastic foundation, a real legacy system, but we're moving to a much more dynamic multi-point engagement model. It's about agility. It's about—" He was just making sounds, a torrent of meaningless, abstract nouns, desperately trying to bury a specific factual problem. Diversifying streams, dynamic models. It was the jargon of incompetence. Graham Ellery closed his leather-bound notebook. It was a small, quiet sound, but it was the loudest thing that had happened all day. It was the sound of a door closing in a negotiation. You know you have lost when the other side stops taking notes. Note-taking is an investment. It is collaboration. It is a sign that the future is being written together. When the pen goes down, judgment has replaced observation. The meeting is no longer about what if. It is about what is and what was a disaster. Colton's voice trailed off. He saw the closed notebook. Derek Vale, the CFO, who had not spoken a single word since we sat down, seemed to shrink in his chair, a man physically trying to dissociate from the exploding grenade next to him. The rest of the lunch was a silent execution. Waiters brought food. They took it away largely uneaten. The acoustics of the room were so perfect that the sound of silverware on china was sharp accusatory. Colton tried twice more to bring up projections and cue 4 next steps each time. Graham answered with a non-committal H&M and did not look up. Finally, Graham folded his napkin and placed it on the table. He had not been there 45 minutes. "I believe I have enough to review for now," he said. He stood. Colton and Derek leaped to their feet, chairs scraping on the hardwood floor. "Graham, we'll have Piper schedule the follow-up for next steps." Colton began. "That won't be necessary," Graham said. He turned, not to Colton, but to me. He nodded. "Once, Tamsin, it was good to see you." And he walked out. Miles Archer, the GM, was waiting in the hall. I saw him nod to Graham as the client left. The door to the veranda north clicked shut, sealing the 3 of us, me, Colton, and Derek, in the sterile, silent tomb. Colton was vibrating. His face was a mask of white-hot rage. He finally ripped open the folded card Miles had left. I didn't need to see it. I knew what it said. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of panic and fury. "What did you do?" he hissed. I stood up. I picked up the single slim file I had brought. "As you requested, Colton, the transition file. I'll be leaving it with Nora Whitcomb, our new acting head of compliance." I paused, letting the new title land. As I'm no longer client-facing, I continued. "I really shouldn't have been in this meeting. Thank you for the lunch." I walked out. I left them there with the... Derek Vale was staring at the wall. Colton Reeves was looking at the 3 handwritten words on the card. I did not go back to my desk. I went to the 14th floor to the compliance department. Nora Whitcomb was a meticulous, humorless woman in her 50s. She was a process person like me. She hated risk. She hated ambiguity. She hated growth mindset buzzwords. "Nora," I said, placing the file on her desk. "Tamsin, I heard you were transitioning." "I am." "Colton's orders. This is the Ellery master file, the original. I'm sure you'll be wanting to review it given the new momentum." She looked at me over her glasses. "I see. Thank you. I will." She didn't ask questions. She just took the file. She would find what I needed her to find. When I returned to my own floor, the atmosphere was electric. The invisible network of corporate gossip was humming. The power lunch had ended an hour early. Graham Ellery had left looking like thunder. Colton and Derek had returned to the office separately, and neither was speaking. I sat at my desk, the one in the open-plan sea of cubicles, a ghost in my own machine. I was invisible, and from there I could see everything. I saw Piper Mays walk to Colton's glass-walled office, then walk back out, her face pale. I saw the frantic flashing of Slack messages across the Momentum All channel, and then I saw the change in the public calendar. Our CEO, Anel Boyd, was a man who lived by his schedule. At 3:50 p.m., his entire afternoon cleared, replaced by a single 2-hour block colored blood red. Urgent strategic realignment. The whisper started. Realignment, Ellery, the club. The clock on my desktop clicked to 6:02. Colton Reeves stood up. He smoothed his suit jacket. He ran a hand through his hair. He was attempting to reconstruct his swagger, but it was a poor imitation. He walked the long, open path from his office to Anel's. The entire floor went silent, watching the Green Mile. He entered the CEO's office. The door clicked shut. Anel Boyd was not a pacer. He was a statue of impatience. He was standing, arms crossed, waiting. I couldn't hear through the soundproof glass, but I didn't need to. I could see Colton was talking. He was gesturing. He was selling. He was trying to spin the disaster. Anel was not moving. He was just listening, his face a mask of cold fury. The conversation lasted less than 4 minutes. At 16:06, Anel stopped him. He uncrossed his arms and pointed. He didn't point at Colton. He pointed through the glass across the sea of desks. His finger aimed directly, unequivocally at me, even from 50 yards away. I could read his lips. The question was sharp, brutal, and visible to the entire office. Why wasn't Tamsin in that meeting? Barbara Colton froze. His entire narrative, the one he had broadcast to the CEO himself. Tamsin has recognized her legacy skill set. Tamsin is proactively stepping away, had just collided with reality. He was trapped in his own lie. That was my cue. The system now required my input. I opened my email. I did not write to Anel, I wrote to Nora Whitcomb. I attached 2 files. File 1, Ellery Master Agreement executed 5-1 PDF. The original contract, the one Graham Ellery had signed, the one with my non-negotiable compliance and data security addendum. File 2, Ellery Momentum Proposal Q4 PDF. The version Colton had been circulating, the one I had found on the shared drive, the one he had presented to Nora Whitcomb, acting head of compliance. CC Anel Boyd, CEO. Subject, urgent file discrepancy, Ellery account. Abrotwe Nora. As I was transitioning my files to you per Colton's restructure, my final audit flagged a critical discrepancy you must be aware of immediately. The version of the Ellery proposal currently in circulation File 2 appears to have omitted the original fully executed Compliance Data Security Addendum File 1. As you know, that addendum is the non-negotiable foundation of our agreement with Ellery, and its removal places Blue Fern in immediate and material breach of contract, invalidating our insurance coverage for the account. Can you please pull the server logs to clarify the timeline of this change and confirm which version is active? Best, Tamsin. I hit send. I watched Anel's office. He was still glaring at Colton, who was stammering. Anel's desktop notification pinged visible on his monitor. He saw the subject line. He saw the urgent. He saw the CC. He dismissed Colton with a wave of his hand and sat down. He opened my email. He read it. He opened File 1. He opened File 2. He put them side by side. A new email chimed instantly. Nora Whitcomb was a fast, efficient, and deeply territorial animal when it came to risk. She had hit reply all. From Nora Whitcomb to Tamsin Cole, CC Anel Boyd, CEO. Subject, re-urgent file discrepancy Ellery account. Anel, based on Tamsin's email, I've pulled the server logs. The compliance addendum was manually removed from the master file at 1432 EST on October 15th. The user ID that authorized the deletion, C. Reeves. This is a critical finding. We are completely exposed. I need to brief you immediately. Abrar, the omitted compliance addendum, a single-line item in an email. This was no longer about a growth mindset. This was no longer about who was a team player. This was no longer about my feelings or Colton's ambition or even the fire her fast text. This was about breach of contract. This was about fiduciary duty. This was about millions of dollars in liability and a client relationship that was now dead. The entire landscape of power had just been redrawn by a single email. The negotiating power was no longer in Colton's glass office. It was sitting at my desk. My personal phone, dark on my desk, vibrated. A text from an unsaved number. Graham Ellery. It was not an apology for the awkward lunch. It was not an offer of sympathy. It was a business instruction. Let me know when you're leading the account again. We'll sign then. I closed the message. I didn't need an apology. An apology is emotion. This was acknowledgement. This was confirmation that my signal had been received and his had been sent. The digital and political dominoes were falling exactly as the process dictated. The CEO's office door remained closed, but the shockwave from inside had already fractured the floor's fragile peace. People were typing with performative intensity, pretending not to be watching the drama unfold. They were refreshing their calendars, whispering in Slack DMs, creating the very data trails I specialized in analyzing. They saw a political crisis. I saw a system audit in progress. Ibru Fur, back in my apartment, away from the noise, I began the dissection. The time for gathering evidence was over. Now was the time for assembly. This was the forensic phase where you lay out the fragments on a cold, clean table and reconstruct the anatomy of the crime. I started with the timeline, the spine of any investigation, a simple 3-point chronological sequence. T-48 hours, the preparation. Colton Reeves, using an admin proxy account, modifies the user permissions for Tamsin Cole. He is surgical. He doesn't delete my account. He downgrades it. Specifically, my ability to view the real-time vendor audit log. He cuts the optic nerve. T0 hours, the crime. With my oversight capabilities disabled, Colton approves the blacklisted vendor Vector Solutions. He overrides a permanent termination flag, an act of gross negligence at best, deliberate fraud at worst. He infects the system, T plus 3 hours, the cover-up. Colton Reeves sends the iMessage to CFO Derek Vale, complete with my photo. Fire her fast. The intended outcome is to remove the one person who would eventually discover the Vector reactivation. He tries to eliminate the witness. This sequence alone established premeditation, but I needed to show the fingerprints, the specific tools used. I dug into the server logs for the permission change. Colton hadn't used his own admin privileges. That would have been too obvious. The logs showed the change was authorized by a temporary user group, Momentum Exec. I ran a query on the group's creation. It was created by Piper Mays 1 hour before my permissions were altered. She had been instructed to create a tool without understanding its purpose. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. And it was a direct traceable link from Piper's keyboard to Colton's directive to the neutering of my oversight. Brack next. The money. Every corporate crime has a financial component, no matter how small. It's a matter of professional pride for the corrupt to skim a little off the top. I pulled the expense report for the disastrous lunch at the Westminster Oaks. Colton, in his haste, had made another classic amateur mistake. He had filed the expense twice under 2 different categories. First, he submitted the full receipt under client entertainment travel, the standard channel, but then he had submitted it again under a new temporary project code he had created. Compliance transition costs. He was trying to bill a power lunch and a handover meeting as 2 separate billable events. It was a petty, easily detectable fraud amounting to a few thousand, but to an auditor it was a confession written in black ink. It demonstrated a mindset of routine deception. With the timeline and the financial motive established, I moved to the organizational chart. The official one was a neat pyramid, but power in a corporation is never that clean. I opened a diagramming tool and created a RACI chart. Responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. It's a tool I use to define roles in a project. Here, I used it to illustrate the coup. Official, RACI Ellery account compliance responsible, Tamsin Cole, accountable, Tamsin Cole, consulted. Legal, Tamsin Cole, informed, CEO, CFO. Actual RACI, as enacted by C. Reeves, responsible for removing addendum Colton Reeves, accountable for subsequent breach. Colton Reeves consulted non-informed CEO after the fact with a false narrative. It was a stark visual representation of his unauthorized seizure of control. He had made himself accountable for a process he didn't understand, and in doing so had made the entire company liable. Now, for the external pressures, the Westminster Oaks Club was a separate but parallel battlefield. I opened the file containing Piper's Instagram post. As I suspected, when I checked her profile again, the post was gone. A panicked attempt to erase the evidence. Futile. The original high-resolution image file I had downloaded was already on my encrypted drive. I had run a SHA-256 hash on it the night I saved it. It created a unique, unforgeable alphanumeric string, a digital fingerprint. Any attempt to alter the photo, even by a single pixel, would change the hash. I now had mathematical proof of the photo's original state. Deleting the post didn't destroy the evidence. It only demonstrated consciousness of guilt. Ebrishri, and then there was the self-incrimination. The iMessage was the spark. But the fire had spread. I searched the archives of the Momentum All Slack channel. As I expected, someone in that group had taken their own screenshot of Colton's iMessage and posted it in the channel with a single emoji. The wide-eyed, a digital gasp. The crucial piece was the reply. 3 minutes later, it was from our CFO, Derek Vale. He hadn't used an emoji. He had replied with a single damning word. Acknowledged. It wasn't a rebuke. It wasn't a question. It wasn't Colton, what is this? It was an affirmation. He was confirming receipt of the directive. He was now an accessory. He had seen the fire her fast message and had officially on a company server acknowledged it. He could no longer claim ignorance. Abrakai compiled everything. The timeline, the permission logs, the fraudulent expense report, the before and after RACI chart, the hashed time-stamped Instagram photo, the screenshot of the Slack conversation with the CFO's reply. I sourced the Westminster Oaks Charter and highlighted Clause 7.4b again, this time adding a note. The Charter grants the GM and the Ethics Board the right to intervene directly and report findings to a member's parent organization to protect the club's reputation. I bundled all the files into a single encrypted container. I digitally signed it with my unique cryptographic key. I named the file exhibit Oaks 1825 zip. This was not an HR complaint. HR deals with feelings and policy violations. This was a legal dossier. It was built to be read by lawyers, auditors, and board members. I opened my email. I created a new message to Nora Whitcomb, acting head of compliance. Subject: for your review supporting documentation, re-Ellery account. Nora, attached is a consolidated file of my forensic audit concerning the recent irregularities on the Ellery account. The data points to a series of premeditated and unauthorized actions that have placed the firm at significant legal and financial risk. This is provided to you via the official compliance channel for your independent review and action. This is not being routed through my direct management given the circumstances. I attached Exhibit Oaks. I hit send. One copy was now in the system protected by the compliance department's protocols. A. Browe. My next step was to freeze the battlefield. I logged into the internal portal for the legal department and filled out a simple form. Request type: litigation hold. Case name: Ellery Account Integrity Review. Key personnel: Reeves, D. Vale, P. Mays, T. Cole. Description: requesting an immediate comprehensive litigation hold on all digital and physical records related to the named personnel and the Ellery account retroactive 90 days. This includes emails, chat logs, server access logs, and expense reports. A potential for material breach of contract and willful misconduct has been identified. Submitting a litigation hold is the corporate equivalent of pulling a fire alarm. It creates an undeletable, legally binding snapshot of all data. It would now be automatically blocking any attempts by Colton or Derek to wipe their drives or delete their messages. The CFO trying to erase his iMessage thread. Too late. The snapshot was already taken. Finally, I sent one last short message to Miles Archer, GM, Westminster Oaks. Time: 17:30 p.m. Message: Miles, Tamsin Cole. My formal report on the Ellery account irregularities has been submitted internally at Blue Fern. I am prepared to provide a formal deposition for your hearing if required. Let me know the process. The pieces were now all in motion, on separate tracks, all aimed at the same target. I leaned back. My work was done. All that was left was to let the processes I had initiated run their course. They had wanted to remove me from the system. Now the system was all they had left, and every gear, every circuit was working against them. I mapped out the three most likely scenarios in my head. A. The warning shot. The Westminster Oaks Club concludes its hearing. Colton receives a formal reprimand and a suspension of privileges. Miles reports this to Anel, the CEO. Colton is publicly embarrassed. His reputation damaged, but he keeps his job. The Ellery pitch is cancelled. Blue Fern takes a financial hit, but the cancer remains. B. The surgical cut. Anel Boyd, armed with Nora's report and faced with Graham Ellery's silence, terminates Colton for cause based on the vector fraud and the removal of the compliance addendum. Derek Vale gets a slap on the wrist. Piper is quietly reassigned. I am offered my old role back. The problem is contained, but the culture that allowed it persists. C. The system purge. The litigation hold and the CFO's complicity trigger a full-blown internal investigation by the board. Graham Ellery formally withdraws his business, citing a catastrophic failure of governance. The scandal forces not just Colton's removal, but Derek Vale's as well. A full-scale restructuring of the executive team is initiated to restore client confidence. The organization chooses to save itself by amputating the infected limb. I had built the case to make Scenario C not just possible, but logical, the only choice for a system designed to survive. The litigation hold I filed was a silent digital tripwire. The entire system was now a read-only crime scene. Nothing could be deleted. Nothing could be hidden. The panic that followed was immediate, though muffled by corporate decorum. This was no longer a personal dispute. This was a matter, and in a company like Blue Fern, a matter requires management. A. Brower. The first attempt at a solution was not a purge, it was a patch, a classic soft settlement attempt orchestrated by our CEO, Anel Boyd. He summoned me to his office, the same office Colton had been dismissed from less than 24 hours earlier. Anel didn't sit behind his massive desk. He was perched on the edge of it, attempting a posture of collaborative concern. He smelled faintly of expensive soap and desperation. "Tamsin," he started, his voice a low, confidential rumble. "This entire situation has gotten terribly out of hand. A breakdown in communication, a misalignment of momentum. Brewer." I said nothing, I just waited. My silence was a vacuum, forcing him to fill it. "Colton, he's a high-energy asset." "Tamsin. Sometimes he moves too fast, brakes get cut, people get jostled, but his intentions are aligned with our growth. He removed a legally binding compliance addendum from a major client contract. Anel. He did it 48 hours after deliberately disabling my oversight permissions. That isn't moving fast. That is premeditated fraud." My voice was flat. I was not accusing, I was stating a logged fact. Hebrew Anel winced. He hated facts. He preferred narratives. Yes, a serious misstep. Nora has briefed me. And the Vector situation deeply troubling. He's been corrected strongly. He leaned in. "But we can't let this derail the Ellery account. Graham respects you, I respect you. You're the memory of this place, Tamsin. So, here's what I propose. We're going to put you back on the account. You'll resume your oversight duties working with Colton to get this back on track. A partial restoration. You'll be the quality control layer. How does that sound?" He was offering me a truce. He was offering me my old job back. But as a subordinate, I would be the compliance babysitter for the man who tried to destroy me. He wanted me to be the good girl, the team player, and quietly clean up the mess. "Brrr, no," I said. Anel blinked. "No, Tamsin, this is a significant—" "No," I repeated. "That is an unacceptable operational model. The system, as is compromised. You cannot have two competing heads of operation. It's inefficient. It creates risk, and it will fail. Graham Ellery will not sign a contract with a fractured command structure." I stood up. "Anel, you have a binary choice. If you want the Ellery account, and the operational integrity that ensures it, I will require full unencumbered restoration of my role as head of operations. That includes full authority over vendor management, contract finalization, and all associated compliance protocols. Partial restoration is not a business term, it's a recipe for another disaster. And if I don't do that?" he asked, his voice hardening. "Then you don't, and I will not be the quality control layer for the resulting breach. The choice is yours. Thank you for your time." "Oh, Brebri." I walked out, leaving him in the vacuum I had created. The office was a battlefield with no signs. Every email, every Slack message was a potential landmine. The most telling signal was not a sound, but the profound echoing silence from the CFO's office. Derek Vale had gone to ground. He was a man who lived in email, who governed by CC. Now he was dark. He hadn't replied to a single thread in 36 hours. He was in his office, the door closed, no doubt on the phone with his personal attorney, terrified of the iMessage, acknowledged that my litigation hold had immortalized. Abro Piper Mays, however, was not so disciplined. She was still trying to fix it. An email from her landed in my inbox, the subject line dripping with forced sweetness. A time for healing and ho'oponopono. I stared at the Hawaiian word for reconciliation. "Hi, Tamsin. I know things have been so stressful and fast-paced lately. I feel like there's been so much miscommunication, and I truly believe in our mission here. Colton asked me to reach out to you to set up a time for the three of us to just talk. No agendas, just a space to reminisce about the why of Blue Fern and find our synergistic path forward. Can you send me some times that work for you to prepare an agenda? Best, Piper. Prepare an agenda for no agendas." She was an idiot and she was a pawn. She was asking me to do the emotional labor of my own surrender. Brofer, I hit reply. To Piper Mays. Subject, Time for healing and ho'oponopono. Piper, thank you for the outreach. Unfortunately, I am unable to assist with this as per Colton's email to the CEO and the Momentum All channel. My legacy skill set is best utilized in a back-end capacity, and I am proactively stepping away from client-facing work to support the new Momentum. I'm sure you and Colton have this in hand. Tamsin. I copied the exact text from his public email. I was simply obeying his directive. It was a perfectly polite, completely vicious no. Colton, meanwhile, was not in hiding. He was on the offensive. He was trying to re-seize the narrative to prove he was still the head of strategic momentum. He blasted the entire company with a 7-page PDF. Subject, Blue Fern 2.0, a new vision for agile growth. It was a masterpiece of meaningless corporate art. It was full of charts with upward-pointing arrows, Venn diagrams that didn't overlap, and paragraphs of text salad about disrupting the disruptors and leveraging core competencies for future-facing paradigms. It was also his death warrant. On the cover in 48-point font was the title of his flagship project, the Graham Ellery Initiative, except he had spelled the client's name wrong. E-L-O-R-Y. Graham's name was E-L-L-E-R-Y. It was a small thing, a typo, but it was everything. It was the same carelessness that led him to approve a blacklisted vendor, the same incompetence that led to the shrimp allergy, the same arrogance that made him think no one would check the fine print. He had broadcast his fatal flaw to the entire company, including the CEO's office. Nora Whitcomb, the acting head of compliance, saw the PDF. She saw the typo and she made her move. An email dry as bone was sent from her office to Colton, copying Anel and the head of finance. Subject: Spending Freeze Project Code Compliance Transition. Colton. In light of the accounting irregularities I flagged yesterday regarding the dual-expensed Westminster Oaks lunch, I am placing an immediate spending freeze on your cost center pending a full audit. All expenses and vendor approvals under your authority are suspended until further notice. She hadn't fired him. She hadn't accused him of fraud. She had simply surgically cut off his money using the petty cash fraud as the justification. He was now a head with no budget, a king with no kingdom. Hebrew then came the lawyers. I was summoned by the legal department, not for a chat, for an interview. This was not Anel's soft soap. This was two partners from our outside counsel in a sterile room with a court reporter. They informed me that my litigation hold request had automatically triggered the company's whistleblower policy. They were therefore obligated to interview me. They were not my friends. They were there to assess the company's total liability. Ms. Cole, the lead lawyer, began. We are just trying to establish a timeline. Can you confirm this is the original Ellery agreement you drafted? Yes. And this addendum, he pointed. This is the one you allege was removed. It is the one that is absent from the version Mr. Reeves circulated. A fine distinction. Did you at any point see Mr. Reeves remove it? No, I only have the server logs which Nora Whitcomb forwarded to you showing his user ID, authorizing the deletion. Right, the logs. He shuffled his papers. Now regarding this fire, her fast message. You received this directly. I was included on the group chat. Yes. The evidence file contains the member list. And what was your interpretation of this message? I am a systems analyst, not an interpreter. The message consists of 3 English words and a photograph of my face. I have no interpretation beyond the literal. The lawyer looked at me, a flicker of professional respect in his eyes. I was not emotional. I was not hysterical. I was not telling my story. I was a machine feeding them the data they needed. I was the perfect witness. The documents were the accusers. I was just the librarian. The meeting took 20 minutes. The internal market was now in freefall. The rumor of the Westminster Oaks note, the one Miles had placed on Colton's table, had leaked. Someone had seen it. Hearing scheduled, code 704B. No one knew what 7.4B meant, but they knew what hearing meant, and they knew it happened at the Westminster Oaks, which was not a court, but a place of power. The scandal now had a name, a secret code. It was delicious, and it was terrifying. And then Graham Ellery dropped the bomb. An email, not a text, not a phone call, an official BCC to his lawyer's email sent directly to Anel Boyd. Anel, in light of information I have received regarding significant internal restructuring and unresolved governance issues at Blue Fern, all commercial commitments, negotiations, and data sharing under the Q4 proposal are hereby paused for a 10-day review period. We will await your formal update on how you plan to resolve these structural risks. Graham, 10 days. He had started a clock. He had taken the internal crisis and tied it to a non-negotiable external deadline. Anel Boyd's calendar, which was visible to the entire company, immediately filled with red blocks. Board call legal Nora Vale urgent. The question on the floor whispered over the coffee machine that Colton had once bragged about was no longer, is Colton in trouble? The question was, what happens if we lose Graham? Colton was a ghost. He was in his office, but he was gone. He was frantically posting in the Momentum all channel trying to rally his allies. Big things coming, just a temporary systems check. Growth mindset. He got 3 likes, all from unpaid interns. The senior VPs, the directors, the people who had once laughed at his jokes all silent. His digital parachute, woven from his father's connections and Derek Vale's debt, was disintegrating in midair. The final act of the day belonged to Piper. At 4:51 p.m., an automated email went out from the HR system. Piper Mays is out of office. Reason, medical leave. Expected return, TBD. She had snapped. The stress, the lies, the Ho'oponopono email that had been so brutally rejected. It was too much. She had taken the only exit she could. I looked across the office. Colton's glass cube, once the bright, loud center of strategic momentum, was dark. He was still in there, a silhouette against the setting sun. But the room was empty. His assistant was gone, his allies were gone, his money was gone. He was just a man in a box waiting for the system to process his deletion. Kiabri. The invitation was not an invitation. It was a court summon disguised as a calendar entry from the CEO's office. Subject, Ellery account path forward. Location, Westminster Oaks Club Veranda North. Attendees, A. Boyd, G. Ellery, C. Reeves, D. Vale, T. Cole. Anel Boyd, our CEO, was trying to broker a peace treaty on neutral ground. He was bringing everyone to the table to force a resolution. What he failed to understand was that the Westminster Oaks was no longer neutral ground. It was my territory. I had already filed the complaint. I had already invoked the charter. He was walking his star player onto a field where I had written the rules of the game. I arrived last by design. The veranda north was exactly as I had left it. Only the configuration had changed once more. Miles Archer, the general manager, had taken Anel's request for a collaborative roundtable and interpreted it with the cold precision of a military strategist. There was a round table as requested, but it was small, forcing an uncomfortable intimacy. There were 5 heavy, high-backed leather chairs, not 4. There were no place cards with job titles, just names. Anel Boyd, Graham Ellery, Derek Vale, Colton Reeves, and my chair, my name, Tamsin Cole, was placed at the seat with its back to the wall, offering a commanding panoramic view of the entire room, and most importantly, the only door. From this seat, I could see every entrance, every exit, every flicker of expression on the faces of the others. It was the chair of an observer, a judge. It was the seat of power. Anel and Derek were already there, speaking in low, tense whispers. Colton was trying to look relaxed, leaning back in his chair, one arm draped over the back. He was wearing a new suit. The cuffs were a 1/4 inch too long. He laughed at something Anel said, a sharp barking sound that was too loud for the hushed acoustics of the room. He was a man performing the role of someone at ease. I walked in. The heavy door closed behind me with a soft, definitive click. Colton's manufactured laughter died in his throat. He saw me, and his eyes flickered to my chair, to the name card. He understood the geography of the room instantly. He was exposed, his back to the door while I was entrenched. "Brew Tamsin," Anel said, standing. "Glad you could make it. We have a lot to sort out." He was no longer trying to be my friend. He was trying to be the boss. Before I could reply, the door opened again. Graham Ellery entered precisely on time. He was not dressed for a business lunch. He was wearing a simple dark cashmere sweater and trousers. He looked less like a client and more like a man visiting a sick relative. His gaze swept the room, cataloging the players, the seating arrangement, and the tension. His eyes met mine. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was the same nod from before. "I am here. I have chosen my side." He took his seat between Anel and Colton, a physical buffer between the CEO and his failing golden boy. I was the only one who had brought anything. I placed a single, slim, black leather portfolio on the table in front of me. It contained exactly 3 sheets of paper. I was not here with an arsenal of evidence. I was here with a key. Miles Archer entered, followed by a waiter. Miles's face was a mask of professional neutrality. "Gentlemen, Miss Cole, on behalf of the club, I must apologize for the frequent room changes. We had a minor security protocol review that required some adjustments to the booking system for everyone's privacy." He was giving Anel a corporate-friendly excuse for the chaos, a plausible deniability he could use. He was managing the situation, containing it within the club's walls. Bibru, the waiter, then moved with silent efficiency. He placed a single small dish in front of each of us. Amuse-bouche. It was shrimp. A beautiful, single, perfectly poached shrimp resting on a bed of avocado mousse. Colton stared at it as if it were a severed finger. It was a message delivered on club china, a cold, deliberate reminder of his first catastrophic failure of process. It was Miles Archer saying, "I have not forgotten. The system remembers. Graham Ellery looked at the shrimp, then looked at Colton, a flicker of something between pity and contempt in his eyes. He did not touch it. Vibruv Miles Archer then placed a folded piece of cardstock in front of Colton, just as he had done before. This time it was not handwritten. It was a typed formal memorandum on club letterhead. "Mr. Reeves," Miles said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of the room, "this is a formal acknowledgement for your records. It confirms that you have been notified of a pending disciplinary hearing regarding a formal complaint filed under Ethical Charter 7.4b. We require your signature confirming receipt." He offered Colton a heavy gold-plated pen. Ibra K. Colton was trapped. Anel was watching him. Graham was watching him. He could not refuse. His hand shook as he took the pen and scribbled his signature. He was no longer just a Blue Fern employee in trouble. He was now a subject in a formal ethical investigation by a body far older and more powerful than his father's influence. Miles retrieved the paper and the pen. "Thank you. Please enjoy your lunch." And he was gone. The silence he left behind was absolute. Ebrofi Anel cleared his throat, trying to wrestle back control. "All right, clearly there have been missteps on all sides. The goal today is not to place blame. It's to find a solution that keeps the Ellery partnership strong." He looked at Graham. "Graham, we value this relationship above all else." Graham Ellery let the statement hang in the air. He turned his head slowly, not to answer, but to Colton. "I have only one question," Graham said. His voice was soft, surgical. "Then I will have all the information I need to make my decision." He paused, letting the weight of the moment build. "Who?" he asked. His eyes locked on Colton. "Authorize the removal of the compliance and data security addendum from my contract." The room stopped breathing. This was it. The core of the crime spoken aloud in front of the CEO and the client. Colton opened his mouth. He was a cornered animal. He did what all cornered animals do. He tried to spread the blame. "That was a decision made by my team," he stammered, his eyes darting towards Derek Vale, who looked as if he was about to be physically ill. "We were streamlining the documents for the new Q4 momentum push. It was an operational decision to reduce." He was trying to frame it as a collective strategic choice. My team, a faceless, nameless entity he could sacrifice. As the words "my team" left his lips, the door to the veranda north opened. Nora Whitcomb was standing there, our acting head of compliance. She was holding a single file. She had not been on the invitation list. Anel looked up, startled. "Nora, what is this?" Nora ignored him. She looked directly at Graham Ellery. "Mr. Ellery," she said, her voice crisp and clear, "I apologize for the interruption. I was asked by Blue Fern's legal counsel to be on standby to provide factual clarity. Should it be required? I believe it is required now." She took one step into the room. "There is no team signature authority on master legal agreements. The server logs, which I have in this file, confirmed the compliance addendum was removed using a single senior-level authorization key." She then turned her gaze to Colton. "The authorization signature belongs to you, Mr. Reeves, and you alone." Graham Ellery had been holding a silver pencil, poised over a notepad he had not yet written on. As Nora finished her sentence, his hand, which had been perfectly still, made one tiny movement. He set the pencil down. He placed it parallel to the top of the notepad. A final, perfectly aligned gesture. It was over. The pencil was down. Judgment had been rendered. No more notes would be taken. No future would be written. I had not said a word. I didn't need to. The system had spoken for me. Nora stood at the door, a sentinel of process. Colton was ashen, exposed, and stripped of his last lie. Anel stared at his ruined deal, the architect of its demise sitting right next to him. The lunch ended 15 minutes later. No one ate. There were no handshakes. There were no promises of follow-up calls. There was only the sound of chairs scraping back, the quiet closing of the door, and the profound, complete absence of a future. The aftermath of the veranda north lunch was not an explosion. It was a vacuum. The silence that fell over the executive floor was heavy, absolute, and steeped in panic. Anel Boyd, our CEO, had retreated to his office. He was no longer managing momentum. He was calculating collateral damage. Derek Vale, the CFO, was a ghost. His complicity now a documented liability. Colton was a pariah, isolated in his glass office. A man whose primary credential, his connections, had just been proven worthless against a superior process. The 10-day pause, initiated by Graham Ellery, was a ticking bomb. The CEO had a choice: fix the problem or lose the account. Anel was trying to find a third option, a compromise that would allow him to save face and keep his political appointee. I would not allow a third option to exist. I returned to my desk, opened my email, and drafted the terms of surrender. It was not a plea. It was not a list of grievances. It was a contractual addendum, a path to resolution sent directly to Anel Boyd, Nora Whitcomb, and the 2 lawyers from our outside counsel. Subject: proposal resolution of Ellery account operational integrity failure. Anel, counsel, the events of the past week, culminating in the client's formal 10-day pause, have revealed a critical failure in our operational command structure. The restructure enacted by Mr. Reeves was not a strategic realignment. It was a procedural breach. This breach is not a matter of opinion. It is a violation of the existing Ellery Master Agreement. I opened my leather portfolio and pulled out the key, the single sheet of paper I had been saving. I draw your attention to the original fully executed Master Agreement, Section 9, Clause 4.1, the Post-Engagement Consent Clause. This was a clause I had written into every major contract for the past 5 years. It was my sleeping provision, a fail-safe I had built to protect the process from exactly this kind of political interference. Clause 9.4.1 states, in part, any change, replacement, or removal of key personnel designated as lead ops or compliance architect. See addendum, a Tamsin Cole must be submitted in writing to the client for formal consent no less than 30 days prior to the change. I let the words sit on the screen. Mr. Reeves's restructure and his subsequent attempt to have me hand over the file were executed in direct violation of this clause. His removal of the compliance addendum was simply the final fraudulent act. The initial breach was his unapproved removal of me. This was not just an internal matter. This was not just professional degradation. This was a material breach of our primary contract with Graham Ellery. Therefore, I propose the following 2-step resolution. 1. Immediate reinstatement of Tamsin Cole to her full unencumbered role as head of operations, restoring the command structure stipulated in the original executed contract. 2. A formal written apology to be issued by the CEO's office to Graham Ellery, acknowledging the internal breach and guaranteeing the integrity of the operational team moving forward. Should Blue Fern be unwilling or unable to execute these terms, I will be forced to pursue all available legal remedies to protect my professional standing against the documented acts of reputational degradation and tortious interference, which are now on file with both Blue Fern Legal and the Westminster Oaks Club. I hit send. It was a declaration. Either Blue Fern returned to the role of lead ops as defined by my contract, or they would face me in court. The response was not from Anel, it was from Graham Ellery. He had clearly been waiting for my move for confirmation that the architect was still in control. A new email landed sent to Anel Boyd and CC'd to me, Nora, and the entire Blue Fern board. Graham's ultimatum was beautifully simple, subject Ellery account path forward. Anel, my 10-day review is complete. My terms are simple and non-negotiable. No Tamsin Cole, no contract. We will await your decision. Graham. Checkmate. Anel Boyd was now trapped. The math was simple. On one side, the cost of a nepotism hire, his pride, and the political fallout from Colton's father. On the other side, the 9-figure Ellery account, the company's reputation, and a lawsuit from me. The numbers spoke for themselves. Ethics were irrelevant. This was a cost-benefit analysis, and I had just made myself the only profitable variable. CFO Derek Vale, silent until now, finally made his move. He saw the guillotine. He saw his acknowledged iMessage flashing in his head. He tried to cut himself loose from Colton. He sent an email to Anel, copying me and legal. Subject, a new path. Anel Tamsin all. In light of Mr. Reeves's unfortunate and unilateral lapses, perhaps a compromise is best. We can create a new operational integrity task force which Tamsin would audit while Colton's team pivots to new markets. We could rename the process, a fresh start. A Brewer. He was trying to rebrand the fraud. He was offering me a new title with no power, a classic corporate shell game. I replied all to Derek Vale, CC Anel Boyd Legal, Nora Whitcomb. Subject, a new path. Derek, a new name, does not erase the track record of the users who hold the keys. The original terms are the only terms. Tamsin. My rejection was absolute. The system was now moving with me and against them. A memo was distributed from the legal department citing the litigation hold. It was a clawback clause advisory. It stated that any bonuses or commissions associated with the Ellery account, which Colton had already preemptively booked, would be subject to a full clawback if an internal investigation found willful misconduct, gross negligence, or actions leading to public reputational harm. My 7.4b complaint was no longer just about a bad lunch. It was now the legal trigger for defunding Colton's entire tenure. Then, from the Westminster Oaks Club, the final judgment, Miles Archer sent his official findings to Annelle Boyd. As the complainant, I was copied. Subject Findings Complaint G2991 Code 7.4b, Mr. Boyd. Following a formal hearing, the Westminster Oaks Ethical Charter Board has concluded its investigation. We find that Mr. Colton Reeves did knowingly use club facilities to enact the public professional humiliation of a fellow member, Ms. Tamsin Cole, in direct violation of Clause 704b. Disciplinary action is as follows. 1. A formal written reprimand has been placed in Mr. Reeves's permanent club file. 2. Mr. Reeves's personal booking privileges for all premium club venues, Sapphire Hall, Veranda North, are hereby revoked for a period of 6 months. 3. This finding is being delivered to you as the representative of the member organization for your own internal review. Regards, Miles Archer, GM. C. Burswiz, was the nail. The public humiliation was no longer an allegation. It was a finding of fact by a third-party board. Legal now had everything it needed for the clawback. Nora Whitcomb, in compliance, did her part. She sent a quiet email to Legal and Annelle. I have completed the packaging of Exhibit Oaks. It is now prepared for review by the board or any required external third-party auditor. Please advise on delivery protocols. She had given them the exact legal language they needed. She had built the fortress walls high, protecting the company from the lawsuit Colton's father would inevitably threaten. She had not just fired him, she had documented, archived, and neutralized him. In the midst of this systemic purge, the bureaucratic arm of the company finally pathetically twitched. HR sent Colton Reeves a performance improvement plan, a PIP, a tool for managing underperforming analysts, not for indicting criminal fraud. It was a joke. It was a rubber stamp on a death certificate. It was, as the outline stated, far too late. The final act of desperation came from Piper. Her medical leave had lasted exactly 1 business day. She must have been ordered back or realized that fleeing made her look guilty. She appeared at my desk, her face pale, her eyes red. "Tamsin," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, can we just talk? Just us off the record. There are things you don't." She was appealing to a person. I was no longer a person. I was a process. I did not look up from my screen. I opened a new email addressed to her. To Piper Mays. Subject, Communication Protocols. Piper, as per the active litigation, hold case Ellery Account Integrity Review. All communications regarding this matter must be conducted on official recorded channels. Please see the attached link to the company's official whistleblower and reporting policies. You may direct your statements to Nora Whitcomb or legal counsel. I hit send. Her phone vibrated in her hand. She looked at the email, then at me. She understood. There was no just us. There was no off the record. She turned and walked away. Abro. The last domino fell from the CFO's office. Derek Vale, seeing the final inevitable conclusion, sent his last email. It was to Annelle. Annelle, I have reviewed the findings from the Westminster Oaks and Nora's latest report. I am appalled at the unilateral actions Mr. Reeves took, apparently using my name and the Momentum Initiative to mask his own agenda. I was not privy to his deletion of the addendum or his fraudulent vendor approvals. I strongly suggest we take immediate and decisive action. He had cut the cord. The man who had acknowledged the kill order was now claiming to be just another victim. The CEO had no moves left. Graham's ultimatum was on the table. The board had been copied. The CFO had turned state's witness. The legal liability was confirmed. Abruptly, my inbox chimed. It was a calendar alert from the office of the chairman of the board. Subject, Emergency Board Vote Operational Leadership. Time, tomorrow 8:00 a.m. The organization had made its choice. The blood was in the water, and the system, now fully alerted to the infection, was moving to purge it. There is no sentiment in a corporate immune response. There is only survival. 8:12 a.m. the emergency board vote. I was not invited. I was at my desk. The same desk in the open-plan floor where I had been isolated. I was the ghost at the feast. The entire global board was dialed in. I pictured the voices. The chairman from London, the private equity partners from New York, the APAC president from Hong Kong. They were not discussing my feelings. They were not debating the morality of fire her fast. They were reading Nora Whitcomb's report. They were reading Graham Ellery's one-line ultimatum. They were staring at a 9-figure hole in the P&L sheet. Abruhi, 8:19 a.m. A source, a quiet ally in the legal department, sent me a one-word Slack message, approved. Anel Boyd, our CEO, was making his move. I could picture it perfectly. He was not defending Colton. He was not protecting his political appointee. He was executing the only move I had left him. He was sacrificing his knight to save his own king. He was proposing my full reinstatement. He was framing it as his own decisive strategic decision. He was taking credit for his own surrender. It was a smart political play. It didn't matter. A win is a win, regardless of whose name is on the press release. 8:27 a.m., the vote. 8 minutes. 8 minutes for a board of billionaires to quantify the cost of Colton Reeves. They weighed his father's influence against Graham Ellery's contract. They balanced the price of a potential lawsuit from me against the price of Anel's wounded pride. It was never a fair fight. It was a simple, brutal calculation. I was the asset. Colton was the liability. The math was clean. Brr. 8:31 a.m. My inbox chimed. The sound was deafening in the silent office. From the office of the CEO, subject, organizational update, head of operations, it was sent to the entire global distribution list. To all Blue Fern employees, to ensure and accelerate our strategic momentum, Tamsin Cole is reappointed as head of operations effective immediately. She will have full authority over all contract control and vendor management. We look forward to her leadership as we move into Q4. The entire floor, which had been pretending not to watch me, erupted in a silent explosion of activity. Heads popped up over cubicle walls. The quiet clicking of keyboards became a frantic clatter. Slack notifications began to cascade across my screen. Not a single word of apology, not welcome back. It was a system patch, a firmware update. User T. Cole had been restored to permissions admin. It was the coldest, most beautiful email I had ever read. Hey bro, 8:44 a.m. My inbox vibrated. Graham Ellery, we're back on. Send me the revised agreement. I'll sign it before lunch. 13 minutes. It had taken him exactly 13 minutes from the public announcement to re-engage. He hadn't been reviewing. He had been waiting. He wasn't congratulating me. He was closing the deal. Business, as always, was unsentimental. I sent him the original file, the one Colton had tried to bury. Abro, 9:02 a.m. I watched Colton. He was in his glass office, staring at his screen. He had received a new calendar invitation from Human Resources Legal. Subject, urgent, formal internal hearing. It was not a request, it was a summon. This was not a PIP meeting. This was the corporate equivalent of being read your rights. A. Bursay, 9:15 a.m. A new email. This one from finance sent to Colton and copy to Anel, Nora, and me. Subject, respending freeze project code compliance transition. Mr. Reeves, this email is to confirm that as of 9:15 a.m. East, your corporate expense account card ending 8819 has been permanently deactivated. All pending approvals under your authority have been revoked and rerouted. They had cut his money, a head of strategic momentum who couldn't buy a plane ticket. He was a general with no army, no budget, and no future. He was officially a non-person. A. Bro, 9:28 a.m. 2 men from the IT department appeared at Piper Maze's empty desk. They were not from our floor. They were the security team, the ones who handle hostile terminations. They moved with a quiet, grim efficiency. They did not pack her personal items. They unplugged her docking station, took her laptop, her 2 monitors, and her keyboard. They placed them on a rubber-wheeled cart. Her medical leave was over. Her account was being deleted as they walked. She was a loose thread, and the system was methodically snipping her out of the tapestry. She had backed the wrong horse. She had failed to read the manual. It was a simple, fatal process error. A. Brewer, 10:05 a.m. Nora Whitcomb, the Queen of Compliance, sent her final report. She replied all to the board, to Anel, and to legal. Subject, final report, Ellery account integrity review. Attached is the finalized summary of findings. The investigation confirms a willful, premeditated breach of contract by Mr. Reeves, compounded by a deliberate attempt to degrade a key operational head, Ms. Cole, to conceal the breach. This combination of public humiliation and unauthorized contract modification created a critical, multi-million-dollar litigation risk, which is now resolved. She had given them the exact legal language they needed. She had given them everything. "Hey bro, 10:20 a.m. I got a quiet ping on my encrypted chat client." My source in IT. "You didn't see this, but Vale is in panic mode. He just tried to delete his entire iMessage history from the server. The litigation hold blocked it, of course, but the attempt has been logged. He just created new evidence, intent to destroy. He's done." Derek Vale, the acknowledged. He had tried to wash the blood off his hands and had only succeeded in staining himself further. His silence had been complicity. His final act was a confession. Brofe 11:00 a.m. Anel's door was closed. I saw him through the glass, pacing his phone to his ear. He was shouting. He was red in the face. My phone chimed. A text from Miles Archer, the GM of the Westminster Oaks. "Mr. Boyd has been formally notified of our board's findings." He was displeased. "Regards, M&L wasn't just dealing with a business failure. He was dealing with a social one. The Westminster Oaks Club had publicly censured his golden boy. He had lost face with his peers. A crime far worse than losing a contract." 12 p.m. The all-company email landed. The final pathetic lie from Colton Reeves. Subject: a new chapter. Team. After much reflection, I have decided to resign from Blue Fern to pursue new opportunities. I'm incredibly proud of the momentum we built. Decided, resign, pursue. The coward's trifecta. He was still trying to control the narrative to spin his execution as a choice. Brewer, 12:20 p.m. Anel Boyd hit reply all. His response was a work of brutalist art. "We accept your resignation. Effective immediately." That was it. "No thank you for your service. No, we wish you the best." 6 words. The digital equivalent of a door slammed shut, a lock turned. 12:33 p.m. A man from facilities arrived at Colton's glass office. He wasn't touching the personal items. He was there for company property. He walked in and with a single practiced motion peeled the massive Think Big poster from the glass wall. It made a ripping sound, a long, sticky sigh of adhesive giving up. He crumpled it in one hand and tossed it into his trash cart. The wall was bare, save for a few ghostly smudges of glue. The erasure was complete. Abro, 13:10 p.m. My desk phone rang. It was Anel's assistant. "Tamsin, the CEO needs you in the 40th floor strategy room now." Not his office, the war room. I took the elevator. I walked in. Anel was there. The 2 lawyers from outside counsel were there. Nora Whitcomb was there. Derek Vale was conspicuously absent. It was a long, polished table. They were all seated. There was one empty chair at the head of the table directly in the center. Anel didn't speak. He just pointed to the chair. I sat down. I was no longer the subject of the meeting. I was the one presiding. 14:00. My personal phone rang. I looked at the screen. Graham Ellery. I didn't excuse myself. I answered it. I put it on speaker. "Tamsin." His voice filled the silent, high-stakes room. "Graham, the contract is on my desk just like you wrote it. One question before I sign." Anel leaned forward, his hands clasped. "You lead, I follow." "Is that the arrangement?" Graham asked. I looked at Anel. I looked at the lawyers. "That is the arrangement," I said. "Good," Graham said. "I'm signing now. My team will see your team tomorrow. You lead." The line clicked. I placed my phone face down on the polished table. I looked at Anel. The silence was mine. "Well," I said, "let's begin." Bro. The 40th floor strategy room was not designed for comfort. It was designed for autopsies. The long black table was a slab of polished granite, cool and unforgiving. The lighting was recessed, casting sharp, direct spotlights that eliminated shadows and exposed every flaw. There was no art on the walls, no plants, no decor. There was only the table, the chairs, and a panoramic indifferent view of the city below. It was a room for consequences. Anel Boyd sat at the far end. The 2 lawyers flanked him like undertakers. Nora Whitcomb was a silent, validating presence. I sat at the head of the table in the chair they had left for me. The silence was not awkward. It was procedural. We were waiting for the final input. A junior analyst, his face pale with the terror of entering this room, slipped in and placed a single leather-bound document in front of Anel. He then placed an identical one in front of me. It was the fully restored, redrafted Ellery Master Agreement. All of Colton's clumsy edits had been reverted. My original compliance data security addendum was back, its clauses shining like newly polished steel. Ibro Anel did not speak. There was nothing left to say. There would be no apology. An apology is an appeal to emotion, an attempt to bridge a personal divide. This was no longer personal. This was a system reset. An apology would have been an admission that he, the CEO, had been wrong. The system does not allow for such admissions. Instead, it corrects the error and moves on. He pushed the document across the table toward me. Beside it, he placed a heavy black fountain pen with the blue fern logo embossed in silver. The pen was the instrument of surrender. He was not giving me a gift, he was handing me the controls. Brower, I took the pen, the metal was cool in my hand. I could feel their eyes on me. Anel's filled with a cold, resentful necessity, the lawyer's with detached professional curiosity, Nora's with a grim, process-driven satisfaction. They were watching to see if my hand would shake, if I would show a flicker of triumph, of anger, of relief. My hand was perfectly steady. My breathing was even. I uncapped the pen with a soft click. Power is not a rush of adrenaline. It is the absolute absence of it. It is the calm, quiet, and total confidence in the outcome of a process you designed. I signed my name. The ink was a dark, definitive black. The signature was clean, precise. It was not a victory lap. It was the final line of code in a program that had now successfully executed. I capped the pen and placed it beside the signed document. The email confirming Graham Ellery's signature arrived less than an hour later. The deal was done. The supply chain of commitment from the client through the CEO to the operational head was restored. The broken link had been removed, and the system was whole again. The official company-wide announcement followed as sterile and efficient as the room I was sitting in. From the office of the CEO. Subject, welcome back, head of operations. The subject line was a small, calculated concession to humanity. The body was pure corporate scripture. Tamsin Cole has resumed her full duties as head of operations. All vendor approvals, contract finalizations, and compliance matters will now be routed through her office as per the original charter. We are pleased to have her focused leadership guiding these critical functions. There were no gifts, there were no emojis, there was no cake in the break room. There was only a quiet, brutal restoration of order. A few minutes later, a formal report landed in my inbox from the head of IT security. It was the final deliverable from the litigation hold. Subject, archival confirmation case Ellery account integrity review. Ms. Cole, this memo is to confirm that the communication thread flagged in your initial request, originator C. Reeves timestamp 10/03/51 EST content includes fire her fast has been permanently archived in a legally compliant immutable format. All associated metadata has been preserved. The litigation hold has now been lifted. The archive is available to legal counsel upon request. It was the receipt, the proof of purchase for my revenge. The weapon that had started the war was now locked in a digital evidence vault forever. On my own terminal, I logged into the admin panel for the vendor approval system. I saw the clumsy, temporary protocols Colton and Piper had tried to implement. I deleted them. I reverted the entire system to my last stable build, the Tamsin Cole configuration. All high-risk vendors now required a two-factor compliance sign-off. The automated red flag system for retroactive price hikes, a feature Colton had disabled, was now active again. The machine was humming, secure and logical, just as I had designed it. Bro. I left the strategy room. I took the elevator down to my old floor. I walked through the sea of desks. People avoided my gaze, not out of fear, but out of a sudden, deep respect for the invisible architecture of power they had just witnessed. I walked past the glass-walled office that had been Colton's. It was empty now, dark. A cleaning crew had wiped the glass clean. There was no ghost, no echo of his presence. It was just a room, an empty container waiting for the next variable. I didn't look in. There was nothing to see. The past is not a place for a systems analyst. It is merely a collection of logged events. Bro. My phone vibrated on my desk. A text from Miles Archer. Tamsin, your Westminster Oaks file G2991 is now officially closed. The board's disciplinary action has been fully executed. The veranda north is once again available for bookings. As the party whose honor has been restored, you have priority booking for the next 30 days. Let me know if you need it. Regards, M. Justice. It was a quiet administrative thing, the restoration of booking privileges. It was all the apology I needed. I opened the photo album on my phone. I scrolled back to the day it all began. There it was. The screenshot, my face, tired and concentrating, the blue eye message bubble, the 4 words, "Fire her fast." It was the spark, the initial data point that had launched the entire process. I looked at it for a moment, not with anger, but with a cool sense of detachment. It was an artifact from a finished project. It no longer served a function. I tapped the screen. A small trash can icon appeared. I pressed it. Delete photo. I confirmed it was gone. While my desktop, the Slack channel leadership momentum was still blinking. I right-clicked on the channel name. Rename channel. A dialog box appeared. I deleted the old name. A monument to a failed philosophy. I typed in the new one. Operational integrity. The change was instant. The narrative was now corrected. A final message slid onto my screen, a direct message from Graham Ellery. One line, "Good to have the architect back." I did not reply. The system was running, the work was speaking for itself. I turned off my monitor, the contract was signed, the process was complete. The story ends here. At the precise point of restored control, there is no epilogue. Birthry, thank you for listening to this story. We'd love to build a community right here. So let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from and share your thoughts on Tamsin's revenge. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and give it a boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear it.